So we're going to take a look at a video that I've actually gone through and I've tried to condense to wrap this 20 plus minute lecture with Janet Yellen standing at the podium as she addresses a conference of thousands of executives tied to the banking sector and banking deposits industries. Ladies and gentlemen, the debt ceiling, U.S. budget, jobs, unemployment, debt default, payment delays, and most importantly, Social Security payments and other obligations made by the government, the U.S. government, to pay veterans and families who rely on these benefits. These recipients are the focal point of this discussion, as well as the future of the U.S. dollar and its potential collapse worldwide, while other nations, including BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, continue their efforts to replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Meanwhile, we have states like Texas who are beginning to plan and prepare to recede from the U.S., the United States of America, and become their own country by taking the first steps and starting out with their own currency, a new digital currency backed by gold, hard assets, precious metals.
In this video, I want to share really interesting news related to the development of new currencies. So several states here in the US have already made it clear that they oppose a CBDC, they oppose a central bank digital currency. Well, Texas just passed a bill to create 100% reserve gold and silver backed digital currency. There's no doubt that this sets a really interesting precedent and directly challenges the authority of the Federal Reserve.
Texas is not only the second largest U.S. state in America by both area and population, second to Alaska and California, respectively. Texas is a workforce to industry base, and Texas's sheer size makes it an unrivaled powerhouse in the global economy. In fact, if it were a country on its own, Texas would be the 9th largest economy in the world, ahead of Australia, Mexico, Spain, and Russia. Now, as we go through this video and listen to what Janet Yellen has to say, and I'll be interjecting here and there to bring you guys a little bit more clarity and deeper dive on what she's actually saying and what she's not really saying and what she could potentially mean by what she's saying or what she's excluding. I want you guys to pay attention very closely and notice her body language and her mannerisms. Let's take a look here.
Good morning, everyone. As some of you may know, this is not my first time speaking.
So this is just an introductory address to the crowd of bankers, executives in the banking industry, investors, insurance. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen addresses everyone and just, hey, I've been down this road before. You guys may recognize me, remember me.
Now, our nation has seen significant economic and technological change, but my conviction remains as firm as it was nearly a decade ago. Today, I'd like to share my views about the strength of community banks, the recent developments in the regional banking system, and the debt limit situation.
All right, so before we go too far into this, I want you guys to really be considering and thinking about what has actually transpired up until this point. And we'll just leave it at changes to cryptocurrency with the SEC, with Ripple, XRP, with Binance, with a lot of these cryptocurrency exchanges, security-backed exchange, security-backed tokens, as well as central bank digital currency, FedNow system. All the changes that have been taking place leading up to this very moment kind of eerily coincide with one another and will make sense as we go through this video and what Janet Yellen has to say here.
It's made possible by the partnership between the federal government and many institutions in this room. Large banks hold most of the assets in the banking sector. I felt your impact firsthand through our relief efforts.
Now, before we go any further, just do me a favor. Drop a comment down below. Let me know, do you think that the government, do you think that any branch of the government, do you think the Treasury, do you think that Janet Yellen, the Biden administration, whomever, has our best interest in mind? Do you think that their sole purpose is to make sure that we thrive as a country collectively, independently, like families having the ability to have access to education and wealth building opportunities and food, clean water, being safe and secure? Or do you think that maybe that may not necessarily be the case, and instead they would much rather take all of our money, as much of it as possible, tax payments, use this in a variety of ways and funnel it out of our country into other countries and other business ventures, while also allowing more and more people to come into this country undocumented and illegally? Now, Janet Yellen is referring to the JP Morgan Chases of the world, banks of Wall Street. And you guys may be aware that they hold secret meetings, the Treasury and these C-suite executives, these CEOs of Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, all these big banks controlling all this money, controlling this fractional reserve banking system, controlling the country, controlling the economy, controlling the people. As well, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really would appreciate it. But your likes, the thumbs up, they mean the most because they help this message get out to more people through the YouTube algorithm and help prevent or try to counter YouTube suppressing us having the ability to have these conversations and access to the truth and this information.
In the middle of the pandemic, Treasury collaborated with banks across the country to deliver economic impact payments to millions of families. Our support helped Americans put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. With your help, we deployed assistance to hundreds of thousands of homeowners facing foreclosure.
Look, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't like the way that this sounds. Now, granted, it comes across as though she's saying, hey, everybody, pat yourself on the backs for doing a good thing. You know, we intentionally put this country at great risk, physically, emotionally, and financially. And then after we started the fire, we brought the water to put it out. Pat yourselves on the back. We did a great job. We did a good thing. Now it's time to take back what we gave them tenfold. I'm talking about you, me, all of us, okay? We are all lumped into this. If we look at the overall population of this country in comparison to the lawmakers, the politicians, the elected officials, we are the majority. They are the minority. And when I say we, I mean the collective we of who mostly make up this country, okay? Now, don't get me started on the other implications here of their actions during this pandemic, this height of this pandemic, especially with some recent developments coming out that certain let me make sure I say this correctly. I don't want to look. This is the problem with this platform, is because I want to tell you guys things that I know I can't. And if I do, then I go away. So we'll just say human immunodeficiency V word, okay? Human immunodeficiency V word, okay? Was found to be used in conjunction with some of the products created by companies like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and now have been linked to U.S. soldiers and recent negative health complications as a result. I hope that makes sense, because I'm trying to say this as correct as possible before I get completely wiped out. Hopefully I don't get this video cut, strike taken down or whatever. But I will say that this is why we have Patreon, because that's where we have these conversations without restriction, without censorship, without suppression. So more than welcome to join us over there, because I can guarantee you this, Michelle and I, Squirrel Tribe, we're going to have a lot more to discuss on this topic moving forward, especially from this, because like I said, I condensed this video down to a shorter version for you all, but there's way more to it, way more that they're not telling us, and way more that's about to happen that goes even further beyond this debt ceiling collapse, which is ultimately poised to wipe out a large swath of the population.
In the prior iteration of the initiative, lenders with less than $10 billion in assets accounted for 95% of all program-supported loans. Your banks are playing an equally important role in our current program.
I don't want to be that guy, but it sounds like to me that she's gearing up to wipe us out. Potentially wiping out the smaller banks, credit unions, community banks, regional banks. Now listen to this.
But let me turn to a topic that is on the minds of everyone in this room, namely the recent developments in the regional banking system. In March, the federal government took forceful actions to strengthen public confidence in the banking system following the failures of two large regional banks. The situation has stabilized since then. Aggregate deposit outflows have steadied, and the Fed's Bank Term Funding Program and discount window are working as intended. I believe that the decisive actions that we took in March to provide additional liquidity to the system mitigated the very serious risk of broader financial contagion in the banking system. So let me be clear. These actions were necessary to prevent the difficulties facing two specific banks from spilling over to other banks, including banks on main streets across the country.
Poured in liquidity. Let's think about that. Oh, man. All right. Let's think about it from a future standpoint of what she just said. And this is exactly what a central bank would do to prevent private risk and ultimately gain 100% control by the U.S. government of all money, okay, in this country. But more importantly, if they can do this now, if they can pour in liquidity, if they can interject and not bail the banks out, if they can send money to other countries, if they can allow foreign refugees to come over and collect Social Security that they haven't paid into, if they can open up the borders and just allow floods of undocumented migrants into this country, why can't they do more for you and I? Why can't they do more for the people of this country that actually are a contributing factor to the success and growth of this country? It's GDP, pays taxes. Why can't they do that?
Our actions in March were narrowly targeted. Management, shareholders, and debt holders were not protected by the government.
Narrowly targeted, because it wasn't what they wanted exactly at that time, in my opinion. The new target is going to be much more broad. And it's going to be focused on more than just two banks, okay? But basically what she's saying is that your money in the banks, as she said, were not protected and in some capacity is at risk and will not be insured by the FDIC.
To be sure, there have been some aftershocks of the March developments, including the resolution of First Republic. I believe that these developments are a sign of any shift in the fundamental health of the banking system. We remain vigilant. we continue to closely monitor conditions.
Continue to closely monitor conditions similar to the oversight and surveillance that they would have on a central bank digital currency that they would control, okay, that they would issue, that they would have the ability to impose restrictions, expiration dates, negative interest rates, mandate where you can and cannot buy and spend money, shop, or utilize the token or digital currency or a ledger balance, as you would never actually be able to withdraw this and hold this money yourself off the exchange, off the central bank's blockchain, your own cold storage, physical hard. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. That would be eliminated. While FedNow is taking applications and rolling out, expect July 1. And that is if we can survive through June, which she's about to talk about here in just a moment. So bear with me.
As I've said, we have a set of effective tools at our disposal, and we're prepared to take further action if needed.
I'm worried about these tools that they have available, but I'm also more worried about the further action. Now, do me a favor, comment down below and tell me what you have gathered so far by what she's saying. What do you think about these tools and further action that Yellen is referring to? I have my own opinions, but I don't want to persuade the audience. I don't want to have any bias here. So I'll save that for after you guys leave your comments, and I'll put that up on Patreon where we can have a much more genuine conversation without having to dance around all the policies and guidelines and rules of this platform.
And that includes if smaller institutions suffer deposit runs that pose the risk of contagion. Looking forward, President Biden has said that we must make sure we are not in this position again.
And I am sure that that would be a huge concern of his, especially moving forward with the goal of being elected for a second term. Remember this, Executive Order 14067, executive order that Biden signed in. But also remember what I told you in a video not too long ago is that the Biden administration's plan or plans for this country, for the economy, quite possibly how it may interact and engage with other countries, namely China, isn't done yet. And in my opinion, they need another term to make that happen. Now, granted, if the next president ends up being, Republican, then quite possibly all that they have done and worked to create so far would be dismantled, torn down. You got to think. Just think about the opposition coming from the other side of the aisle against these government-imposed surveillance methods of tracking, tracing, and taxing through a central bank digital currency. And that's just the beginning. I mean, we're talking about a long list of growing problems within this country, from money, the economy, the currency that we use or cannot use, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, our ability to have discrete transactions and privacy. Our U.S. Constitution is at risk. All the while, the other side of this would prefer a more progressive approach and more opportunities for industries and businesses to execute on implementing new swimwear for young boys and toddlers to tuck their packages so they can be more feminine and execute on these new bills that would allow young children to flee the home and be lawfully justified to engage in mind-altering drug use and gender reassignment and all the mental health risks that are associated with that, If we see another 4 years of this, those 4 years could potentially set us back indefinitely. I don't even know if we would ever really be able to recover from that. Again, some of this stuff we can't cover on here, but a lot of this we are covering on Patreon because we've even seen Matt Walsh be silenced. We've even seen Tucker Carlson be silenced on similar topics and issues that I think are very, very important. And if we're not having these conversations about them and the problems that they introduce to our society, to our country, to our people, to our upcoming generations, to our safety and how we, appear to other countries, allies and enemies, which are kind of hard to tell the difference of now, some of which are elected officials here in this country, then ultimately that silence is only going to be misconstrued and misrepresented as acceptance. And I can tell you guys right now, I don't accept it. I don't accept it. No way, no how.
He's urged the federal banking agencies to consider a set of common sense reforms that would strengthen the oversight of regional banks. President Biden and I are committed to do so, particularly on our nation's smallest banks. Thanks.
The applause from the crowd is really concerning. But small, local, regional, community banks, credit unions, beware. Beware. Jamie Dimon and their secret meetings and these buying of debts and consolidation of assets and acquiring accounts from failed banks, Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, Signature Bank. This is just the beginning. And we are only being given, I don't even know if we're being given half of the story, a small percentage of the story, and of that, how much of it is actually true?
Now, it's important for me to use our remaining time to speak about one specific decision in front of Congress that will have significant implications for your businesses and for the broader domestic and global economy, and that's the debt limit. Yesterday, I told Congress we still estimate the Treasury will likely no longer be able to satisfy all of the government's obligations if Congress has not acted to address the debt limit by early June, and potentially as early as June 1. It's impossible to predict with certainty the exact date when Treasury will be unable to pay all the government's bills. Nonetheless, our current best estimate underscores the urgency of this moment.
Whew, she said a mouthful. But ultimately, June 1, she said it herself, okay? Social Security payments are probably going to be included in the list of government bills that could be affected by this default. And this is not just from me saying it. This is from Social Security advocates that are actually warning Social Security benefit recipients of just how bad things could potentially get in less than 2 weeks' time, roughly.
A U.S. default would generate an economic and financial catastrophe. And a default would reverse all of the hard-earned progress that we've made, and it would set us back even further. Our economy would suddenly find itself in an unprecedented economic and financial storm. Millions of American families that rely on payments for the federal government would likely go unpaid, and that ranges from 66 million Social Security beneficiaries to millions of veterans and military families who have served our country honorably. A default could cause widespread suffering as Americans lose the income they need to get by. And the resulting income shock could lead to a recession that destroys many American jobs and businesses. The economic crisis would be exacerbated by possible disruptions to the federal government's operations. Essential services that enable global commerce rely on the work of federal employees and contractors, and that includes air traffic control and law enforcement, border security and national defense, and food safety in our telecommunications systems. But federal agencies would be unable to pay all of their bills. It's unclear if and how critical government services would continue to function.
You got to really, really think and wonder to yourself, what does it mean when the U.S. government, when the U.S. Treasury can sit here and tell you that they don't know how bad, they don't know what they're going to do in just a few days. They don't know how much their bills are. They don't know how much they are, but they do know that ultimately they will not be able to pay them. While we are reaching dangerous DEFCON levels that other countries who are listening, paying attention, not just through TikTok and social media apps, but watching the news, reading manuscripts, transcripts, having documents leaked by internal employees, they would love to see just this happen. A collapse, a self-inflicted problem created and further perpetuated by our own inaction, with the Biden administration, Biden himself saying that he will reject any budget proposal by the GOP. And as our shields are lowered and our defenses are weakened, we could potentially see a foodborne illness risks, border crisis, impacts to air traffic control, like more so than just Social Security and veterans not receiving their checks on time, which is a big deal. But the implications, like, do you guys understand the severity of this situation? We've been through this before. Biden administration standing before committees and talking about this railroad strike that would have essentially shut down the U.S. economy, an impact of $2 billion per day. That was ultimately drug out until the 11th hour. And then the Biden administration steps in with new laws, signed into law overnight, making it illegal for railroad union workers to strike. Problem averted. Yes, sure. But why did we have to get to that point? But ultimately, this would be the final nail in the coffin. If the U.S. government were to default on its debt and not make good on its payments in the next few days, I don't know if we would be able to recover from that.
And, of course, the financial crisis that accompanies a default on our debt could multiply the severity of the downturn. The U.S. Treasury market serves as the very bedrock of the global financial system, and there's a reason for that. The world has never doubted that America will pay the principal and interest on its bonds in full and on time. That's a fundamental principle of modern finance. A default would crack open the foundations upon which our financial system is built. And it's very conceivable that we'd see a number of financial markets break, with worldwide panic triggering margin calls, runs, and fire sales.
Yeah, so anybody who's investing, purchasing bonds through Treasury Direct, the idea that the government would allow this fragile banking system, this mental construct of fractional reserve banking to crumble, unthinkable. We would be in the collective group and categorized with countries like Argentina, Sri Lanka, Venezuela, Nigeria, civil unrest, rioting, crisis as panic would ensue and permeate throughout the entire country. The collapse would be monumental.
The White House Council of Economic Advisors has simulated the impact of a protracted default. It finds that it could lead to a downturn as severe as the Great Recession. In its simulation, over 8 million Americans lose their jobs. Business and consumer confidence take a substantial hit, and the value of the stock market is slashed by about 45%, wiping out years of retirement and other household savings. And the unemployment rate surges to over 8%, and $10 trillion in household wealth is wiped out. Now, if that sounds catastrophic, that's because it is.
Extremely catastrophic. But the worst part about it is that they've run these simulations and they know exactly how to destroy this country. They are literally preparing to wipe us out. The wealth effect, greatest wealth transfer ever in history, middle class extinction, the Great Depression 2.0. All these would be putting this lightly.
So let me be clear. If Congress does not address the debt limit, there are no good options the Treasury or the government can use to save us from catastrophe.
This might possibly be the most honest statement ever to come out of an elected official's mouth under any branch of government ever. No good outcome. All bad.
Look, and we're a country that keeps its word.
Yeah, right. You're right about that. I mean, there isn't any fact-based or factual information or, historical or empirical evidence that would disprove that statement. But seriously, there is. I mean, I'm just kidding with you guys. But I didn't want to go into great detail on that because I didn't want this video to be 20 hours long.
To trigger a manufactured crisis of our own creation. Time is running out. Households are having to worry about how they will get by without the payments that the government has promised them and that these American families have earned.
And this is exactly what I talked about in previous videos about potentially foregoing paying off debt, eliminating debt, and getting 100% debt free, and focusing on stacking and stocking up and stockpiling and building a stockpile of cash. Because what will happen is we could potentially find ourselves in a situation where all these warnings that are being shared by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen come to fruition. But if you don't have the financial means to sustain for long periods of time, periods of uncertainty, crisis and turmoil within the banking system, the economy, credit, lending, then being out of debt won't necessarily really help you get by day to day with basic necessities and monthly overhead expenses and your budget. So oftentimes people will drain their emergency savings down to zero in order to be debt free, not realizing just how dangerous of a situation that may put them in if they're in need of liquid cash flow, capital, dollars, money at a time like this.
The U.S. economy hangs in the balance. The livelihoods of millions of Americans do too. There's no time to waste.
No time to waste. We are down to the wire. Janet Yellen says there's no time to waste. She's right. But she's also rich. She's also very, very rich. According to Celebrity Net Worth, Janet Yellen accumulated an estimated fortune of $16 million. Her net worth is attributed to her decades-long career as an economist, as U.S. Treasury Secretary. Any possible default, she's going to be perfectly fine. Her family is more than likely going to be all right. Will yours?
I look forward to working with you to promote a strong banking system. Thank you and have a great conference. Thank you.
Strong central banking system controlled by the government and digital currency. Leave your comments down below. I'd love to know your opinions and thoughts on what was discussed here, what was shared, as well as we can elaborate on this conversation and many others like it even further on Patreon. Full videos and extra episodes linked in the description down below. Until next time, you guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. I'll see you real soon.